Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with One Nation Under Whiskey podcast. I'm joined today, and I'm joined as always by my good friend, my business partner, the wonderful Jason Johnston Yellen. But this time around, we've decided to pre-game a little bit and charge our glasses with a little bit of, well, what do we have, Jason? Tell the listeners what we got.
Well, first of all, it's lovely to be here.
It is.
Recapping the year that has been 2021. I was looking at the bottle that we're consuming here out the corner of my eye, and the year 2018 is on it. And it really threw me for a loop where I'm starting to think, which year are we recapping here? Because I've spent most of 2021 believing it's 2020. And so to see 2018 on this label was not good for me. But given that we are dropping this episode the week between what many people call Christmas and what many people call New Year, we have the Christmas Malt 2018 from our friends at the Whiskey Exchange.
Are there people that don't call Christmas Christmas?
Some people call Christmas Day Saturday in 2021. So it's not that they don't necessarily they avoid calling Christmas Christmas, but Christmas Day, Saturday, weekend, you know?
Yeah, it still seems like Christmas to me.
Isn't that a song? It's beginning to feel a lot like Christmas to Joshua, 'cause he's eating Chinese food and he's gonna watch a movie with his family. Bum bum.
Do you have a similar tradition, right? Little Chinese food in a movie? Do you do the Chinese food? Do you have access to Chinese food?
So obviously being vegetarian, like we don't really dip into the traditions of Christmas dinner. Mm-hmm. But as I've talked about many times on the podcast, Saturday for us is pizza movie night. Mm-hmm. And this year, Christmas falls, as I mentioned mere moments ago, on a Saturday. Oh, and really we should say it did fall because this episode is post-Christmas.
Correct.
But with it being on a Saturday, we decided to make Christmas pizza and Christmas movie night.
So your toppings are candy canes and honey glazed ham. Oh no, that's right. You're vegetarian.
Well, you're gonna like this.
Yeah,
you're gonna like this. Yep. We are going to make, full disclosure, we are recording this before the break here. But we will have made a mashed potato pizza with garlic olive oil.
Oh, Manischewitz, does that sound good?
And fresh picked arugula over the top.
Wait a second. How are you able to freshly pick arugula?
Tamara has arugula growing in her greenhouse that we can use on Christmas Day.
There you go.
Yeah, she's been harvesting carrots from the garden. Don't quite know if we'll work carrots into a pizza. We've got beets, golden beets and red beets that are still in soil, ready to be brought out and roasted. Those will definitely appear on a pizza with some freshly sliced apple. We still have some local apples available to us in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia.
I'm telling you, beets, apples, arugula, and goat cheese.
Mm-hmm.
That
100%.
That's a pizza right there.
Yep. Take a tea-boo, little drizzle of extra virgin olive oil over the top of that, crack of fresh pepper, maybe on a green base. We've got so much pesto stored in our freezer. We've got arugula pesto, we've got kale pesto. One of the things we don't have is basil pesto. Our basil didn't do well this summer, but that's a conversation for another day.
Well, just so you're aware, and so our listeners are aware, even though our tradition is Chinese food in a movie, by the time this airs, we will have returned from a trip to seeing my grandma down in Florida. And so we're going to be doing some Florida Chinese food in a movie. So that'll be nice.
Are there some particular Florida traditions that you've got an eye on?
No fucking clue, man. I'm just going.
Wrestle a gator?
I'm gonna wrestle a Florida man. A Connecticut man wrestles a Florida man.
Yep, thong optional. So before we get into our year in review, and one of the things we're going to do in today's episode is identify a favorite One Nation Under Whiskey episode from the year, which that's a difficult task, isn't it? And then we're going to identify a favorite single cask nation whiskey of the year.
Okay.
And given that it's us, probably identify a runner-up or two. We're going to identify a non-SCN whiskey of the year, favorite whiskey of the year, probably a runner-up or two. And one of the things last year, we played around with the rules a little bit. If you want that to be a whiskey, great. If it's a rum, fine. If it's if it's something else, that's fine as well. Just something that you put over your lips in 2021, nearly said 2020, that really got your attention, really had you returning to, and that's fun. But before we get to the business of the day, and let me ask this question. Is there anything else we do in the year in review episode that I've forgotten about?
Well, yeah. I was trying to think about this. The unfortunate thing about this episode, which I loved what you said in our previous episode, where, we say, well, we're going to task ourselves to identify what our favorite episode is. And you said, well, my favorite episode is the year in review episode. So so there's that. So we do the favorite episode. We do the favorite single cask nation bottling or two. We do our favorite non-SCN bottling or two. And I feel as if there is something else that we're meant to be doing. But like, what else do we do, Jason?
I think we just witter away and we enjoy one another's company. I will say this. Some of the book talk weaves its way in occasional episodes. And I have to say, in the last episode, you made reference to the book Zero by Charles Safe. And I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. You couldn't remember the last name in the last episode.
I think it's Seif.
Seife.
Yeah, I think it's Seif. Yeah.
And so I got a copy from my local library.
Whoa.
And I read it yesterday. And I have to say, it was thoroughly enjoyable. From the coverage of the history of zero as a concept, or the avoidance of zero, the avoidance of infinity, into talk about black holes and quantum theory. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I will say, just like my high school experience, the calculus portion of the book was my weakest portion of the book.
Well, yeah.
And I love the talk around, Newton and Leibniz, independently working on calculus. That was very cool. But as he's describing calculus, I'm really sorry, but it went over my head again, just like it did in high school.
It did and does the same for me anytime I return to it. You know this about me, and I'm sure I've mentioned this on the podcast before. I only went as far as high school, and then went on to go to school for broadcasting, and then I graduated from the School of Hard Knocks, and so I never.
Which it shows on your face. There's a lot of hard knocks.
And while I was good at math, I got up to, some geometry, a little bit of trig in high school, but it was never my forte. And and because I didn't go to university or anything, I never went further with my math. Meanwhile, my dad, who decided to go back to university, went in and majored in calculus, and he would show me his work. He's like, so I got my work for this semester, and it was a singular problem. Like, that's your work?
It's a lot, isn't it?
It's a lot. Yep. But what was nice about Zero is that aside from that, I think anyone could read it. Anyone can have a little fun with that book.
For sure. The only thing that I think is now to the detriment of the book is just, unfortunately, that it was published in 2000. Right? I wanted Charles to talk about another 2 decades of zero and infinity and space and quantum, the Large Hadron Collider, like I feel like there are more chapters to go here.
Yeah.
Damn it for being published in 2000. But yeah,
What do you think the sequel will be? Do you think if the first book was 0, will the sequel be 1?
It's interesting you bring this up. I love the fact that there's chapter 0. Like, the book begins with chapter
Yes.
0.
Right? It's like, that's the main point there.
And in one of the points, he talks about a Polish mathematician who was traveling with his wife, and they'd taken 6 items of luggage with them. And at one point, he turns to his wife and he says, I think we've lost an item of luggage. And she looks over them all. She says, no, they're all there. He says, no, count them with me. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? Like, it's missing. And so I got a chuckle out of that. Zeno's Paradox is something that I particularly love. Zeno's Paradoxes I particularly love. And so getting some time spent covering the one in Achilles in a race with a tortoise was great to reinvestigate that as well. So yeah, thumb up to you. And I know that we do have listeners who are taking some of our book recommendations, and this is right up their alley. The Dan Barber, the recommendation of The Third Plate. Chris Sebas actually reached out to me and said, Jason, I don't know if you've read it, but I highly recommend Dan Barber's Third Plate. And I said, Sebas, if you recall, I recommended that book to you. And he said, well, it tells you how much that I enjoyed it, that I've now been recommending to people, including the person who recommended it to me. So Thank you for that.
Absolutely amazing.
And then one final thing that I'll add here, and this was your recommendation coming together with a recommendation by Andrew Miller, The Champagne of People, where he had recommended the book The Swerve to me. And Charles Seif in Zero talks a little bit about atomism, and The Swerve is about atomism. And it's really well done as well. It was one of my favorite books that I read this year. So I'm putting out a recommendation for The Swerve.
The Swerve. Who is the author? Do you recall?
I'd have to look it up. Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head. But I will also say this. When Charles Seif starts talking about Hubble, and you start thinking about the Hubble telescope, the book The Last Stargazer that came out this year by Dr. Emily Levesque, that is fantastic as well. That's well worth a read. There's an example in the Zero book where they talked about a couple of researchers in New Jersey thinking they were getting feedback. They were trying to listen to the universe, and they thought they were getting feedback on the recording from pigeon shit inside their antenna. Yeah. And so they cleaned their antenna to get the pigeon shit out of it, and they still heard this buzzing in the background of the recording. And it turned out they'd been listening to the Big Bang. Microwaves from the Big Bang were being heard by them. And so I just love the thought that two guys who then won the Nobel Prize for their scientific research had been out cleaning pigeon shit off an antenna.
I love that story. That's so that story appeared in the new book, The Stargazer.
So it's in Zero.
Yes,
and
in
Emily
Stargazer,
Levesque covered it in The Last Stargazers as well. So
okay.
I thought that was a good recommendation to put out into the world as well. So there's a few books to be going on with.
So let's get to the matter at hand. Now that we've lubricated ourselves a little bit with this 17-year-old Christmas malt, and again, this is the Whiskey Exchange bottling from 2018. It was a 17-year-old, 58.7% alcohol. And I love our choice. Before we pressed record, we'd said, do we do the red wax or do we do the green wax? And you had said, let's do the red wax because that's the one we like more. And as soon as I poured it, I remember why we like it more. Oh,
it's so good.
It's all the spices of the season. It really is nice.
Yep. And just to reiterate, as always, we purchased this with our own money. Mm-hmm. This is a purchase that made it onto our shelf a couple of years ago now because we wanted it on our shelf.
Do you know something, Jason? You and I could likely save so much money if we just said yes to samples. Imagine that.
Yeah. I'll happily say yes to samples.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily say yes to giving them a good review, but I'll happily say yes to samples.
So let's get to the matter at hand.
Yes.
And so
begin at the beginning.
Step one to our year in review is you and I are to bring forth our favorite episode of One Nation Under Whiskey, not extra. I don't think it makes sense to bring one of those episodes in as a favorite because those stories sort of come and go. Sometimes they come and stay for a while, and when we're talking about tariffs and Brexits and things like that. But still, we're talking interviews, we're talking conversations. And so this morning I went through the list of our fifth season, and I have selected a favorite. Have you gone ahead and done the same?
I hate this part because I know we must say this every year. At least I must say this every year. But we never half-ass an episode of One Nation Under Whiskey. We never think, that's good enough. Nope. We look for interesting guests who'll say something, if not unique, and sometimes they do say something unique, but will certainly bring their unique perspective to the conversation. And as I went through the list of episodes, and I went through 2020's episode, so I also went into a January episode as well.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, so you went into season 4 as well because season 5 starts in the February. Oh, jeepers creepers. I hadn't done that.
Now, there's an extra month to throw in here.
Jesus. Okay, so I'm going to... Yeah, go ahead.
But here's the point I'm making, is we ran through quite a variety of topics. Yes, we had Scotch, but then we also had, partly the spirits business with Bill Thomas. Mm-hmm. We had making a whiskey movie with Greg Swartz. We've got Scotch, an American single malt, and bourbon. We've even got gin covered. I nearly said Jim. It's very early in the podcast, and if I'm loose lips are sinking ships here, I'm in trouble.
Damn it, Jim!
We had, we had time drinking mezcal with Elijah and Jess. Mm-hmm. We had ourselves listing 10 bottles that have to be on shelves. We remembered Michael Jackson, right? Mm. We did a lot, and I say that as somebody who's incredibly proud of how much we covered, and how varied our conversations were. And to then look back over that and say, what was your favorite? That's damn tough. Damn tough. See, even in that little synopsis, I missed rum. We had an episode on our project with Scott and Becky at Catoctin Creek.
What's that have to do with rum?
Rye.
Ah, okay. So you had a big.
Let me say this. We also missed rum. We spoke to Steve Meggery.
Listen to this. You put cognac into a barrel, it's whiskey. You put vodka into a barrel, that's rye whiskey. I think that's where you were going.
Listeners who are only tuning into this episode, Joshua has not lost his mind. He's referencing somebody who lost their mind. So you ready? So now that I've given all the caveats, all the caveats.
Yeah, I've selected. Do you want me to lead, or would you like to lead?
No. I'm going to rip the Band-Aid, or I'm going to lose confidence again. I'm hitting this Christmas malt pretty hard to find some Dutch courage at the bottom of my glass. Okay,
apologies to any Dutch people listening, because that could potentially be a an insult to the Dutch folk. I don't know. We'll wait for June to call in. So I haven't heard the answer to this question. Are you saying it and that's you ripping off the Band-Aid? So am I giving you the floor, or are you telling me to rip off the Band-Aid and I have the floor?
No, you are giving me the floor.
So rip off the fucking Band-Aid already. Tell us what's happening.
Georgie Crawford.
Oh, right. Okay. All right. I like this choice for a multitude of reasons, but I want to hear your reason why the Georgie Conversation was the best, your favorite of the year.
We'd never met her in any capacity.
Ever.
We'd heard so many very good things about her, especially from our own dear Jess. And here we go. I'm going to speak out of school here. I'm going to give some information to our listeners.
Jesus.
You and I are famous for our lack of preparation. And we just pitch up, and sometimes we'll have guests say to us, hey, what are we going to talk about? And we say, it's just going to be a whiskey conversation over some drams. Don't stress it. We're just here to have some fun. And we gave that response to Georgie. And the response was, well, I'm going to need an agenda, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And in that moment, it felt a little Diageo. And obviously, Georgie spent a long time with Diageo. She understood the ins and outs of operating with Diageo. Now here she is with an as yet unnamed distillery on the south shore of Islay. And we put our heads together and we jotted down some questions and we sent them off to Georgie, and that was great. That's exactly what she wanted to see. And it made me question what the interview was going to be like.
Yeah.
If it was going to be a little bit of question 1 leads into question 2, leads into question 3. And then even in the 10, 15 minutes that we chatted before we hit record, we instantly hit it off as a group.
Yes.
And we were just bouncing back and forth. And then we went into the interview, and it was a whiskey chat that was you and I asking the types of questions that we tend to ask, and then going on little tangents as we saw fit. And it was just a really, really good time. And so she lived up to the advanced billing in terms of how other people had spoken about her. She wasn't, Diageo through and through with I'll only talk about what's on the question list. And we left it saying, let's get some drams when we're on Islay the next time. And it just felt like we'd made a new whiskey friend which is what we're always looking to do with our interviews.
Yeah.
And as I look back on it, I think that was one that I really enjoyed putting out there. I'm going to give you a runner-up if that's okay. I'm going to put a pin. I'm going to put a pin in my runner-up.
Okay.
And I'm going to hear your favorite before I give you my runner-up.
I'm so glad that you came up with a runner-up because I also have a runner-up.
I knew you would. Gosh, come on. You know me. I could have 6 runners-up. How many episodes did we do? 22,
I could have 22 runners.
23, right? Very easily. Okay, who's your winner?
My winner, it's an unusual episode in that I do not appear in the conversation at all. And this is season 5, episode 11 with Bill Thomas of Jack Rose. Mm-hmm. And I said this the very next episode, which was us with Bruce Russell. Actually, I said it later on, within the episode, but I think I brought it up again when we were speaking with Bruce Russell. Listening back to that conversation, and I'm not blowing smoke up your ass or up anybody's ass.
Ooh, tickly.
But I stand by that was I'm going to use your word. That was a masterclass in how to conduct an interview. I'm not saying that as a friend, as a business partner, or anything. This is just someone who listens to interviews every day, be it from Terry Gross or Howard Stern or what's his name, Chris from ID10T, armchair expert Dax Shepard. There's plenty of people who have podcasts and shows that are doing all sorts of interviews. And in my mind, the kings of the interview or the royalties of the interview are Terry Gross and Howard Stern. And I felt that conversation was up to the caliber of their interviews. I just thought it was something special, something very special.
Yeah, thank you. That's very embarrassing to listen to so many platitudes. But I said it at the time of that episode as well. I felt so honored to get so much of Bill's time, knowing that he's running around constantly and always thinking up new ideas. He's in a pandemic that's crippling the hospitality industry. He's working out how to support his staff. He's got a lot on his plate. Mm-hmm. And the fact that we could just sit down in a booth on the lower level of Jack Rose and just learn about him was really magnificent. I thoroughly enjoyed that. So I'm glad it resonated, and I'm glad you enjoyed it as much as you did.
I've returned to it a few times. I have.
Oh, cheers.
Yep.
Cheers. I also realized once I gave you the floor to identify your favorite episode, you'd said that you thought the Georgie selection made sense. There was some things that you saw in that selection. I didn't give you a chance to articulate those. So.
Well, in a way, you really didn't need to. I think you identified exactly why I think it makes sense, because of everything that you had said. We were told the type of person that she would be. And it was one of these situations where there was not a second of awkwardness. We went into, she had us at hello, right? We went into it and we were
100%
instant friends. And the conversation was amazingly easy. And there were certain things that, without going into any detail, there were certain things that I think you and I said, let's not touch on this. There's no need to bring this X into the conversation. And I don't think not bringing in X or not bringing in Y to the conversation made it any lesser. I think the conversation did everything that I hoped it would do give us a history as to where she came from, show us a little bit of the crystal balls to where she's going and what she's doing. And meanwhile, a friendship is budding there. Like, that was just cool as hell.
Yep, agreed. Season 5, episode 20. I liked when you said season 5, episode 11 for your selection. So I went back and took a little peek. And so season 5, episode 20 here for the Georgie Crawford.
Yeah. Yep.
So now I feel a little bad because my runner-up is an episode that doesn't include you in the interview.
Interesting.
And I wouldn't normally have selected it for that reason.
But you love the sound of your voice so much that you're like...
But here's why I did select it. Because I don't think I did a lot of talking in this interview. I got to sit back and listen to this other person whose energy and enthusiasm and passion and love for all things whiskey was absolutely contagious.
Okay.
And he really has become one of my favorite people in the industry.
Okay.
And I still don't know if you've sat down and talked with him.
I am at a complete loss. I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to think who this could be.
You had to beg out of the Zoom meeting interview because of illness.
Nick Ravenhall of Holyrood.
Season 5, episode 2, Nick Ravenhall.
Yes.
Yep, managing director, Holyrood Distillery. What a blast it was just sitting, chatting with / listening to Nick in that interview. He was just so much fun. And he's the type of person that you and I come to these, and our listeners come to these too, as people who are already committed to this industry, right? Mm-hmm. And so we don't need to be persuaded of anything. But if you ever encountered Nick and you were on the fence about our industry, you would come away being 100% committed to the industry going forward.
Yeah.
Because of all those aspects that I outlined previously, where he's great. He's mental. And I think his masthead really speaks to that, which was him jumping into the Corrie Vrecken. But yeah, so much fun. Such a good lad. And when I went...
It was him just wearing his budgie and nothing else.
His Florida face mask.
I'm sorry, continue.
So no, just as I was going back through the episodes, it's sometimes it's easy to forget, okay, that's what happened in March, or that's what happened in February or January when we look back on a full year. But yeah, the March episode, and only the second of this season. So
I just got your Florida face mask joke. The fact that it's simply not worn over the nose. It's worn so low it may as well be over your penis. Is that what you're talking about?
No, it's not. It's not. Mine is we just mid-December had Florida man getting kicked off a United flight because he tried to wear a thong as a face mask in protest. So when you mentioned is that him wearing his budgie smuggler, it made me think of Florida man wearing his thong over his face.
Okay.
As a protest mask. Yeah, I'm not making any allusions to Nick Ravenhall's penis, but we can say, Joshua, it's always the penis with you.
It is always the penis with me. So my runner-up, we were both on this episode, so it's nice that I show up in at least 50% of these suggestions. But I'll tell you what it was. This was a season 4 episode. So right at the end, right before not right before our last one, or second to last one, it was Susanna Skyver Barton.
Yep.
And the reason why I thought that that was a special conversation, it wasn't necessarily because it was the three of us getting on. We always have. We've been friends with Susanna for some time. But this was the first time in my memory where we actually had a real conversation around women in whiskey and what it's like to be a woman in whiskey. And we talked about people of color in whiskey. And I think the thing that struck me about that conversation is while we agree with absolutely everything Susanna said and we support it wholeheartedly, there's something about that commentary about women in whiskey coming from a woman, or minorities in whiskey coming from a woman, that middle-aged white man simply can't do justice, I think. And so I was so thankful to have an alternate voice to talk about this very serious fucking issues that are pressing and too often are overlooked, or too often so easy to ignore. It's like, yes, I understand that's a thing, but we're going to do this thing over here. No. That remains a thing, and we need to talk about it. And that's what I liked about this conversation, and some of the feedback that we got, not just from women, but from men as well, saying how refreshing it was to just hear real talk about women in whiskey.
Yeah, and then I think what ended up being one of our final interviews before moving on from Whiskey Advocate magazine. And I would love to have her back on the podcast, at this point in season 6, since we're fully booked until that new season. But I'd love to hear now about being a freelance female whiskey writer, and what does that look like, and what doors are open, and what doors does she feel are not open. Susanna's too smart to talk about that on a recording, but it would be nice to hear how freelance is treating her and what that's looking like.
Yeah.
But she's a great person, a fascinating person to speak with, so we're just looking for an excuse to bring her back on.
Yeah, and any excuse to just hang out with her. That's a good excuse.
So now that we've named a favourite, and now that we've each named a runner-up, which episode do you really regret not mentioning?
Oh, well, it sounds like you had one in the chamber. So why don't you? Because now I have to actually think about it.
See, I'm already racked with guilt, so I have a half dozen in the chamber.
Here, this is what I'll say. Let me come out with this. I'm going to interrupt you. I want to. This doesn't really answer your question, but I think it highlights something.
Well, that's a position then.
I really enjoyed the conversation we had with Miles Monroe at Westward. And part of the reason I enjoyed it so much is, aside from us tasting mezcal with him on an episode, we had Elijah on with us, and Elijah got to ask some questions and asked some really interesting questions. And I just thought it was a great way to. I loved hearing a question from a different point of view, right? And this is why you and I think play off each other so well. We think about things differently. We pose questions differently. Sometimes I have a question you don't think of, and vice versa. And now it's having this third voice, and it makes me look forward to season 6, when we'll have interviews that hopefully Jess will be conducting as well. So bringing on these other voices, that while it doesn't fit into the rubric of what is an episode you wish or you regret not mentioning, it's one that I'm particularly proud of because it's the first time people are hearing Elijah's voice as an interviewer, and I thought it was a great start that'll only get better.
Yeah, no, I will definitely allow it. I think that's a very good answer. And one of the episodes I regret not getting a chance to talk more about in our winner and our runner-up section of this was that very episode with Elijah and Jess, where we drank mezcal together. We talked mezcal. We hung out. We pinged back and forth. We paid attention to their palates, since I think we've spent quite a long time with one another's palates. But in listening to what excites them and what are they looking for, and it was just nice getting to spend time with them, and the fact that there is going to be a rum version of that, and again that'll probably be a season 6 thing, but it'll be nice to sit around and do that again with the rums. And I echo what you said. It's great to hear Elijah in the Westward interview, and it will be great to see what comes from Jess, having her recording equipment and conducting interviews in season 6 as well. Yeah, it's great. I love it. I say it every year, and it doesn't make it any less special to keep returning to it, but I love what we have achieved with One Nation Under Whiskey over 5 seasons, and there's still a few episodes left in season 5. We're not done here yet. Now, I'm sure I'll say this again at the end of the mailbag episode when we do conclude season 5. But we're talking about so many disparate things in just a fun way with fun people that we want to hang out with. We've talked about how much we enjoy Jason Parker. We've talked about how much we enjoy Lee and Bree at Backwoods. We got to hang out with Billy Abbott for an episode. You just talked about Susanna. Here's Elijah and Jess. Bill Lumsden's coming back for part 3. It's just so much fun.
And I'm staring right at it on my screen. This picture with Michael Jackson and his partner of late, well, her not of late, but him of late, but his partner Carolyn Smigalski and Hansa Fringa and Dave Broom, and getting to hear them regale stories about this guy who's done so much for the whiskey industry and has meant so much to so many people, and definitely including yourself. I know his book is never far from your hands. So, there's so many special moments. Difficult to name them all, but yeah, I'm looking at their faces here, and so that's one I kind of regret not bringing that one up.
Wait a second, you answered that same question twice in 2 different ways. Well, listen, my Christmas malt is gone. I believe I heard you extricating the cork for a second pour. I'm ready to move on to talking about some whiskey and getting some more into my glass.
Well, I did pop the cork. I did put a bit more Christmas malt into my glass, but I was thinking about moving on. Are you? I see. I heard the telltale sound of a vino seal.
That's why I was trying so hard not to pour that for myself, and I just couldn't wait any longer. So it has been poured.
So I guess my question for you then is, if you've poured a whiskey, and I guess you can answer this in 3 different ways. Are you pouring one of your favorite SCN bottlings? A. Did you pour one of your favorite non-SCN bottlings? B. Or did you pour something that doesn't fall into either and you just want to feel a bit happier as we go along in the conversation?
If it pleases your honor, my answer is A.
So it sounds like it's a single cask nation.
It is.
There we go.
Talking about a single cask nation.
Talking about talking about nation. Oh, sorry. Talking about nation.
Yeah. Revolution rhymed better with nation when it was in my head. But anyway, here we are. So the game that we play at this time of year, and you're going to guess mine in the next 1 second. But we show. I'm going to take the lead on this one since I've got a pretty decent little pour of it. But we show the color to the other.
And just to make sure, in case people didn't follow the thread there, what we're talking about right now is our favorite single cask nation release of 2021, yes? Mm-hmm. So, continue.
So there is the color. You can describe that to our listener.
So I would say it's a sort of a nice, soft golden color. Maybe the color of clover honey, something like that. Like a nice honeyed color.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The comment I made to you that was in the transition is that coming to this release after the Christmas malt, it had a little something else going on than normal. And so I actually had it leading with pear drops this time. And the last time you and I discussed this, I don't think either of us really went with pear drops on the nose, but it was just so bright and that kind of nice, crisp, hard candy sweetness to it. Now the cereal notes are beginning to open up behind, and then the word that gives it all away is the earthiness is now coming in behind.
Westland 7-year-old, cask number 437, 57.7% alcohol, 7 years in first fill bourbon barrel.
Is not what's in my glass.
Whoa, that's not what's in your glass. Okay. Oh, then it's got to be the Wolf Island.
The thing at the start of this episode before we hit record, you said, We need a pre-dram. What do you think about pouring the Wolf Island? And I said, let's pour something that's not company related, since I knew this was my selection.
Interesting. Wow. Okay, so that is your favorite. Yeah.
So here's the thing.
Go ahead.
It wasn't going to be.
Okay.
And then I kept pouring it.
Right. Yeah.
And, yesterday, I mentioned at the start of today's episode, yesterday when I was sitting down to read Zero, what did I pour? Wolf Island. Mm-hmm. I'm sitting dramming on Wolf Island while I'm reading Zero, and I'm just thinking, this is so pleasingly unlike anything else we've put out into the world that I just love revisiting it, and I just love pouring it. And I will say, hashtag, please drink the full bottle responsibly. Because just like I've been saying for a few years now, Glasgow blend coming in at 43%, you can absolutely hammer that hashtag, please drink the whole bottle responsibly. This Wolf Island at 48, what did we decide upon? 48.8. You can drink it in the late morning, he said, trying to pretend like he didn't drink it at breakfast time. You can drink it in the mid-afternoon. You can drink it before dinner. You can share it with somebody who comes over to your house. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to reinvent the wheel by coming up with something that's not the thing that I am drinking the ever-living daylights out of.
Interesting. So, okay. You know what? I can respect that. It
right?
It reminds me a little bit, and it's so funny that you picked this one. Not just that you picked this one, but how you described it. And what's so funny about it is it reminds me of our response to the very whiskey I thought that it was before we bottled it, when we were at the Westland Distillery tasting cask 437 when it was a 4-year-old. And we're trying to figure out what casks we should go with. Meanwhile, we just kept on mindlessly going back to that one because it was just so pleasing. And then we realized, oh, wait a second, we keep going back to this one. Maybe this is it. And then, things happened that made it so we couldn't bottle that year, and then pandemics and all these sorts of things. And we finally got to bottle it. But the same reasons you talk about why that's your favorite of the year are the same reasons we bottled that Westland. So that's very cool.
Yeah, once I took the Vino seal off the Wolf Island, and you were like, oh, I hear a Vino seal. This is one of the, I think this is the only Scotch we have with a Vino seal.
I think that's correct. Okay. So now it's my turn, and I'm going to show you the color.
There you go. That's also a nice golden promise in your glass. I like that.
Yep. So nice golden color to it. The nose has a lot of hay to it. But it's not soft. Oh, do you need to take care of that?
No, it's just going to be annoying for a few moments since he's decided there's something out there to bark at.
Okay.
My guess is it's a horse and buggy going by on a Sunday.
So you've got a bit of that hay, but there's not a softness to this. There's a big citrusy component to it, and I use this tasting note quite a lot, which I kind of like. Lemon pinwheels. So take lemons, cut them into little circles. You can put them in simple syrup, or you can put them in honey for a few weeks and then fry them, and they become lemon pinwheels. So you get a bit of that.
Sounds delicious.
Yep. There's a little, it's interesting. Drinking that Christmas malt, I was getting what I thought was a peppermint note. And I thought that it was exclusive to the Christmas malt, and now I'm getting it in this. And there's an earthiness to this one as well, but it's not, this is a different whiskey than the one you poured. But there is an earthiness to this one. It is cask strength.
Is it from US online or, and I might be leading the witness here, US retail?
It is an online bottling.
Okay. So the color of it.
I'll say this. No. You keep pontificating, and then if I feel as if you need another hint, I'll toss it this year, right? So
and the earthy, and the online, and the cask strength,
and the hey, and the pretty lady.
My mind is moving towards the 1993 Laughing Frog.
Yeah, it's a great choice. It's not accurate, but it's a great choice. This is what I will say.
Yes.
This is very likely, in my opinion, the best whiskey ever bottled from this distillery, and I am head over heels in love with this distillery. I don't think I've had a bad whiskey from them. This one ticks all of the boxes. They could have bottled it, and I would have said the same thing. So it's not because we bottled it. It's just they made the liquid, we bottled it, and it happens to be my favorite thing that they've ever produced.
I have no clue what you're drinking.
Their annual output is about 450,000 liters, maybe 500,000 liters, somewhere around there. So not a huge operation.
So let me go back to basics then.
Okay.
Really, what's happening is I'm trying to rack my brain for what we sold online this year, and it's been a very, very long
It's
year.
been a long year.
And it's the light. And I know as soon as you say it, I'll say, oh, of course it's that.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, I'm just trying to think through what we've been selling online. So, young or old?
Younger. I wouldn't say, this isn't like a 2 or 3 year old, it's not a youngster, but it's not.
Okay.
It's not
malted barley or other?
Malted barley.
Okay. Scotch or other?
Other.
Okay, online others. I love the thought of our own listeners shouting at their ham radios that they have got a better guess than the guy with the company.
Ian Bruce right now is screaming at the top of his lungs, "Yeah, dafty!"
Other released online.
Do you want?
But it is.
Do you want a hint?
You can give me all the hints.
All right.
All the hints.
Well, there's a hint that would totally give it away.
Please give it away. Give it away.
It was distilled on your birthday. If you don't remember this, then we have some serious issues.
Have you really just named the bottling of the year the one you guessed for my bottling of the year?
I thought that we had selected the same Westland, the same 7-year-old. This whiskey is off the charts delicious. It's doing all the things. Listen, I'm gonna say this to you. I'm gonna say this to our listeners. Mm-hmm. Anyone that has a doubt as to the potential of the category of American single malt whiskey, they needn't look further than Westland, Westward, Copperworks, Virginia Distillery or Distilling Company, Balcones. They're all doing wonderful stuff, and that's just a handful of them. But we make it very clear, and we have done for years, Westland has held an incredibly special part of our hearts since, 2011-ish, 2012-ish, somewhere around there. And like Kilchoman, I think it's been so great to watch that evolution and to be a part of it in some way, shape, or form. And when I pour this whiskey for malt drinkers, it turns heads left, right, and center. There's you can't ignore that this is a masterfully made whiskey, and the fact that we were given access to this cask just blows my mind. I feel lucky that we had access to it. I feel thankful to anyone who's purchased it and who has enjoyed it. Hopefully they see the beauty in it that we did. I just think this is remarkable.
Brilliant. Yeah, no arguments from me. And it's funny when you talk about it was distilled on my birthday, obviously 2 days before Jessie's, and so she's looking for her own June 29 Westland single cask. But a bit like our Virginia Distillery Company cask that came out to be 666, when you find some number associated with some cask that you think, yes, that, you're looking for reasons to not select it. You're looking for all the reasons in the world not to select it. And when I hear June 27 distillate, I'm thinking to myself, if this has any flaws, we're going to get crucified for picking it because it was Jason's birthday. Or picking the VDC because it was 666, what a bunch of little boys. So almost putting it through the ringer more. And so the fact that would come out as your selection, that's a thing, man.
And the fact that it's, I mean, you know me, I am a Scotch whiskey guy through and through. And that does supersede, is that the right word? Am I using the English language correctly? That Scotch whiskey, in my mind, goes above malt whiskey. There's something about Scotch whiskey where I think, for the most part, for my palate, I think it's just been done consistently really well for X number of years in Scotland, and that is always who you compare everyone else's malt to, whether it's because that's the origin of single malt or for any other reason. And the fact that this 7-year-old, right, against what you had said before, oh, is it our 1993 Laughing Frog? Is it, you know, so some of these other amazing Scotch whiskeys that we've bottled, and it's a 7-year-old American single malt whiskey. Yeah, it really is saying something for my palate.
I love that selection. That's very cool. I have a runner-up.
Okay, as do I.
Plus at least 2 honorable mentions.
Okay, I didn't go that far, but if you need me to, I will.
Mine's just back to it's the same as the podcast episodes, where to say this one was head and shoulders above everyone else, but then there was a runner-up and it was head and shoulders above everyone. I just don't see them like that, you know? And I have a hard time presenting them in that way. And so whenever I say, this is the one I'm drinking a ton of, and I think it fits a number of different scenarios, and I love sharing it, and it's been very well received. And then I think, but then there's this other one that I reach for, but it's not the only other one that I reach for or was well received, or so on and so forth. So, yeah, I don't like leaving anyone out here. I'm going to put the Christmas malt back on my shelf and grab my runner-up.
Okay. Well, while you're grabbing your runner-up, I'm going to think about ways to edit this. Do.
Okay.
I'm pouring my runner-up.
Okay.
So show us the color of your runner-up. And by us, I mean me, because...
Yeah, right. Listeners, peer closely to the audio of this color.
So not dissimilar from the first one poured. I would say perhaps a little deeper in color, a little richer in that golden quality. And while the first one I would say was sort of a dull gold, this one's a bit more reflective.
Interesting. I think the first one was more reflective. It could be our video connection. I would say the first one was definitely more reflective. Okay. I would also, if you were to consider the first one white gold, this one would be more of a darker gold in color. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, give me some notes.
There's definitely a note that gives away a few things, but of all the things we released in 2021, I don't think it's going to give away too much. Okay. But I'm getting a nice licorice all-sort sweetness on the nose.
Okay. So a little... is there a particular all-sort? Is it the brown ones? Is it the black ones? Is it the pink ones with the coconut?
It is both the brown ones and the pink ones.
There is a joke in there somewhere. I haven't had enough drink to tell that joke, but those in the know. Okay, so we have some brown licorice all sorts, along with some pink licorice all sorts. What else do you have going on? So for those that don't know all sorts, right? There's licorice, but there's also some sugary confectioner sweetness going on along with it. Sometimes a bit of coconut, sometimes it's just almost like hard icing on a cake layered with the licorice. So sweet, a bit earthy, a bit spicy. What else you got?
A little malty.
Okay.
Definitely a malty sweetness going on in there. Yeah. I was going to say a little something that might have led the witness, but I'll hold off for the moment.
See, I'm kind of scared that we may have poured the same thing again. And then I'm also scared that we may not have poured the same thing.
I'm going to guarantee you that we haven't.
Oh, right.
However, I think we might be of the same mind.
That's a tough guarantee. How?
I stand by it.
Okay. So let me ask some deeper questions here.
Oh boy. Okay. Zeno's paradoxes coming up.
Is it a whiskey?
It is a whiskey, yes.
Okay. Was it released in the U.S.?
It was, yes.
Okay. Was it retail or online?
It was, yes.
Okay.
You had me at retail.
Okay. So it was a U.S. retail bottling. Is it from a distillery that we've bottled for the first time this year?
Yes.
Okay. Can I see the color once more?
Not that the camera is doing a good job of showing it. I'm looking at what's in that camera. It does not look like that.
Is there a peat presence to it?
There isn't.
Okay. So
But it does have a certain heft.
it has a heft. Okay. Is it a Diageo distillery?
It is.
It is a Diageo distillery. Has this whiskey been finished in a particular cask?
It had.
Is it our 13-year-old Inchgower in port?
It is not.
Okay. Huh. So it's a whiskey that's been finished. It's malt.
It is malt, yes,
Okay,
sir.
so it's a single malt Scotch
Malt from a
whiskey.
Diageo distillery, yep.
And it's been finished.
Some might say rested, but I think you and I still say finished.
I prefer it over aced. I don't like aced. I never have. What does that stand for? Additional cask enhancement?
That's what I believe it stands for.
See, and the reason why I don't like rested is resting suggests that cask isn't doing anything, that it's sleeping. Meanwhile, the reason for finishing, or maybe a better term, the reason for re-racking, is that the previous cask had been doing fuck all, and you need another cask to do fuck none? Fuck, what's the opposite of fuck all?
Fuck some.
Fuck some. It has to do fuck some. And so it's not resting. It's working. It's working. So
I tell you, you're not wrong, but I do like the romance of imagining a cask's worth of whiskey being lifted from one and arrested in another. Like, I quite like the romance of that. I 100% take your point. It's working. It ain't resting.
Yeah.
But I like the romance. It's like taking a baby from one crib and placing it carefully in another.
So it's not the Inchgower.
Can
Yeah,
I make a
please.
comment
Please.
before
Yeah.
another guess? Several times when talking about this whiskey, I've made reference to the fact that I couldn't stop returning to the sample. It was doing things that if you just saw the distillery name on the front of this sample, you wouldn't expect it to do the things that it did.
I really am at a bit of a loss here. Like,
You and I have been at this distillery together,
okay, Speyside, Highland distillery owned by Diageo. Why am I having such brain farts here?
Yep, there's dark chocolate, there's fudge, there's warm nougat.
Oh my gosh! Can you give me another hint? Like I have hit a brick wall because, and here's why. Because when we think of our finished casks, there was the Inchgauer, and then obviously one other that I'm not remembering, and then there was the Linkwood, which wasn't a finish, but it was also one you kept returning to, right? Because it was doing things you don't normally see. That's why we bottled that Linkwood. It was showing you spirit. It wasn't showing off cask. Fuck, man.
The label note
Good.
says malty and sherried with particularly enjoyable notes of chocolate fudge, crushed hazelnuts and fruitcake. Note the ground ginger and dark chocolate notes, however, that provide a lovely balance with their spicy, bittersweet elements.
You put me out of my misery. I have no idea.
Distilled in 2011.
Okay. Wait. Oh. Wait. No. We've. It's a Highland distiller, and we've both been there. Okay, go on.
Bottled at 57.8%.
Okay.
As part of our 7th US retail release.
Like I've got all that. Yep. I'm still at a complete loss.
Blair Athol.
That was a finish? Our Blair Athol was a finish?
Was it full maturation? Oh yeah, 10 years maturing in a second fill PX sherry butt.
At 55.5%.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. 55 point, what did you say?
5.
Yeah, 55.3.
Oh, 3. Okay. So, wow. So you've been describing a whiskey. You've led me astray, Jason. You've led me astray.
I have led you astray. I had my notes in front of me and then I put them away and then it all went to hell after that. So,
well, A, that was an excellent choice. B, how exciting was it to finally bottle a Blair Athol? This one was on a list. It's one of these distilleries that people generally don't know about. But when there's good Blair Athol, you can't ignore it. You simply can't. It won't allow you to ignore it.
Well, I like the fact that, and we are going to come back to the maturation on this since I grossly misled you, but the second fill PX sherry butt hasn't completely masked the Blair Athol spirit.
Yes. What I loved about this one, and I thought your point was a great one, the fact that this second fill PX cask didn't overtake the generally softer spirit style of Blair Athol. Mm-hmm. You know, I think when you and I look at cask lists, quite often, if we know the fill and it's sherry, quite often second fill is the one that we'd want to go for because sherry can be funny. It can be sulfury. It could flood the spirit. It could make it so you don't, really detect where that whiskey actually came from. And second fill is nice because you still get sherry, but it allows the spirit character to shine. So, yeah, that's a good selection. And again, back to the fact that, being able to finally bottle a Blair Athol after been offered many Blair Athols before we had our direct relationship to Diageo. Now we have a much more direct line, which is great. But everything else that was offered previous to that was, it wasn't doing Blair. It wasn't doing Blair Athol the way we like Blair Athol to be done.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for that distillery. I don't know how often it gets shown in a good light to the point of being surprised by the sample, and one that we felt confident putting in front of the nation. Mm-hmm. So So now I'm curious. I know, and that's what I said. I knew you hadn't picked this Blair Athol as your runner-up. So I'm kind of curious what you did pick as your runner-up.
So I'm going to show you the color.
A little darker monkey there.
Yeah, a little dark. It's got
Given that we know the video is not to be trusted, what kind of dark color are you getting there?
I would call this a burgundy.
Oh gosh, okay.
Right.
It's not coming across the video like that.
Yeah. It's burgundy. It's
Burgundy, gosh.
yeah, maybe a bit of mahogany, but there's a brightness to it as well. It's almost reflective. So
Okay.
all right.
Okay, reflective burgundy. Okay. I've got a hunch. It would surprise me if this was your runner-up, but are we swimming in the retail pool?
We are not swimming in the retail pool. We are not. And trust me, I did think about it. But if we're simply going by taste or simply going by attachment/taste, I think there's something to be said for attachment to a cask, right? Like the first time when we bottled our Bowmore 30-year-old, that was 80s Bowmore and FWP, right? There was an attachment to that cask because it was a time and place, right? So I feel as if that makes, or that holds a certain amount of importance to it. So I weighed all of the options, and given all of the options, I still went with a non-retail bottling.
Before this recording started, I was certain your runner-up bottle of the year, if it wasn't your actual pick, was going to be the Westport.
And you know what? I zigged while you thought I was going to zag.
So we're back online again. Well, I have shown a deep knowledge and understanding for our online offerings. So
You want some
I'm
notes?
going to impress everybody with this one. So Burgundy, are we swimming in the Scotch pool?
We are swimming in the Scotch whiskey pool, yes.
Oh, geez. Okay, I actually thought the answer to that question was going to be no. Okay. So you would think, okay, so a Burgundy Scotch pool swim here. You might have selected one of my honourable mentions as your runner-up, which is going to make me very, very happy.
Okay. Do you want notes? Do you want to keep guessing? What do you want?
Give us a little bit of a nose. Okay. See if I can be a little more certain before I offer up a guess here.
You may not know this note, but our American listeners will definitely know this note. And Cracklin' Oat Bran cereal. There's a little bit of sweetness for sure. Grain for sure. This is one of the things I loved about this cask. Given the color of it, which is a nice dark burgundy, the malt really comes to the fore.
Mm-hmm. Is there a little bit of wood smoke framing the experience?
There most definitely is. A little bit of that.
I'm going to go pour my honourable mention here. See if it does similar
All right,
things.
well, while you're going to get that, I'm going to go on with a few more notes here. There's this...
Did you see how long it took me to grab that? It is not a million miles away from me.
No, but the other thing that I will say on this one, like if you could somehow infuse a bit of salt water into honey, like
I know
that
exactly
could
what
be a
you've
thing.
selected.
That could be a thing.
Yeah. So, really, I'm hoping that we'll get to sit and enjoy this together and take some of the guesswork out of this. Is this our Stones of Stenness 17-year-old collaboration with Water of Life film?
It is not.
Awesome. It's not. It's not.
It's not.
Oh, Jesus.
Trust me.
It's not.
that one is an honorable mention for me. And
Well, I've now got it in my glass.
yeah,
So.
and no, I'm glad you're pouring it because I feel as if. So here's what I'll have to say about that. Well, there is a bit of a connection to my whiskey and your whiskey in that our 17-year-old Stones of Stenness from the sherry cask, I think, is some of the best spirit from that distillery in a good long while. And I would say the same for this. And I drink whiskey from this distillery all the time, though it's usually never presented in this way. If you want to get this whiskey presented in this way, you'll often have to spend a lot of money. Jason, a hamster just fell out your ear. It's given up. It's tired of trying to run your brain.
Have you poured the Mike Walsh? That's not even a release.
We released it.
That's not a release.
Listen, it is a release.
You talk about me misleading the witness by accidentally calling the Blair Athol finished instead of matured, and then you say you took one of our online releases that was never released online and made that an honorable mention.
What should we do here?
You should leave all of this as it is. Even me whispering the Mike Walsh thing, just leave it all as it is.
Listen.
Hatton.
Yes.
Hatton.
Yes.
Defend thyself.
It is so easy to defend myself on this one. So yes, you are correct. While this wasn't so first off, what is this? You whispered it, right?
Yeah.
We have called this the Mike Walsh Memorial Bottling. Who is Mike Walsh? Mike Walsh has been a friend of ours since before you and I started the company, right? When we were just bloggers, we knew of Mike Walsh. We hung out with Mike Walsh. We drank with Mike Walsh. He was a Massachusetts guy who was really a mentor to a lot of people. You wanted to know about whiskey, you wanted to get into whiskey, you wanted to learn about whiskey. Mike Walsh was one of these fonts of knowledge you go to, and he would welcome you with open arms, and he would teach you in a great way. There may even be some tough love teaching in there as well. Kind of like, when I say tough love teaching, I mean, he was just, I wouldn't go so far as to say he would pour a Westland Inferno for Ollie Chilton like I did, right? That's different. That's just harsh, right? Who does that? But he's someone, as you're learning, he said, no, you've got it wrong. It's A, B, and C. It's not D, E, and F, right? He was just always very good like that. So anyway, he had passed away of COVID in 2020, and that left a huge hole in a lot of people's lives, most importantly in Sherry Walsh's life. His wife is now widow. And in our good friend Jay Cole's life, and our friend Sean Barry and Eric Morgan, and the list just goes on and on and on. And anyway, you and I were able to get a parcel of 22-year-old Lafroig from a first fill sherry cask, and we released 60 bottles of it. And these bottles were only sold to friends of Mike Walsh or family or whomever, and you and I each got a bottle as well. And this is why I bring up the fact that it's not just a whiskey, like the selection process is not just a whiskey that tastes great, but it can be a consequential cask. That cask can have a certain meaning, or the release of whiskey can have a certain meaning.
Yeah.
And I find myself in tears every now and again just thinking about Mike Walsh's passing. And it's not going to happen now. I've already done that on the podcast. But when I think about releases that really meant a lot, even though we only had 60 bottles and couldn't share it with the nation,
Yep.
this cask means a whole lot to me. And the reason why it didn't take the number one place is because it wasn't like an official release. It really is a runner-up because we only had the 60 bottles and it only sold to Mike's friends. We couldn't really even talk about it.
And we haven't. You're exactly correct. And so you came into this saying it's an easy defense, and you're absolutely spot on. It is an easy defense as a special cask, as a celebration of a life, as a celebration of a whiskey lover. J. Cole, who you mentioned there, if any of you watched John Campbell's Going Away, YouTube extravaganza, and they actually took videos from Lefroy lovers and seamed them all together, or sewed them all together. There's one moment where J. Cole, who you'll recognize as having this jet black Gimli style beard, where he is sitting with the Mike Walsh bottle on a table in front of him.
Yep.
And Mike Walsh making it into that John Campbell Going Away extravaganza was so cool. And the fact that's the exact bottling that you've got in front of you.
Yeah, exactly. And just to show how important this bottling was, not just to us, but to Lefroy as well. Simon Brooking got a bottle of this to bring to the distillery. So now you and I have 2 bottles at the Lefroy distillery, one of them being the Great Isle Swim bottling, and now one of them being this Mike Walsh Memorial bottling. This whiskey doesn't just hold a place in our hearts and in the hearts of Mike's friends, but this goes down with Lefroy history. He's now a part of Lefroy history in a really special way, and it's an honor to be, a small part of that. And here we are.
Yeah, cheers to that sentiment. Cheers to Mike Walsh, the life of Mike, and Sherry and Jay and all of his friends. You and I, and this connects us so perfectly to something I said in the last episode that I wanted to come back to in this year in review. But when you and I put our heads together and we thought, how can we get our Giving Tuesday, our annual Giving Tuesday Nation event, to reach $100,000, which would have been the biggest in our 4th year of doing it. We put the Mike Walsh bottle as the prize that would release at $100,000. And our nation, in one day, raised $230,000 for a range of charities, a host of charities, which was incredibly special and overwhelming and wonderful. But there was Mike Walsh, and there was the Mike Walsh 22-year-old Lefroy in sherry as a never released item presented as a potential prize for somebody who helped us get to that $230,000 donation point. So it speaks to what you're saying there about how special Mike was and how important his legacy and his memory is. And then the draw with charity to do something good with an unreleased bottling that would help shine a light on Mike and charity and giving. And it all just came together so brilliantly, so absolutely perfectly. And I toast the nation for what they did on Giving Tuesday to help us unleash all the prizes, including the Mike Walsh, upon the nation.
I'm not going to add anything to that. Well said. right? It gets back to
Cheers.
the nation. So cheers.
I'll cheers that with my 17-year-old Stones of Stenness,
So
which was an actual release.
are we meant to be pouring runner-up whiskeys as well?
No,
honorable mention whiskeys?
No, I just thought I could join you with your runner-up selection. And unfortunately, I misread it all. No, we are going to transition over to some non-SCN alcohol. I am curious, though. I've clearly gone down the path of selecting the Wolf Island, having the Blair Athol in retail as my runner-up, and then, obviously, an honourable mention went to the Stones of Stenness. You went with Westland 7-year-old peated, Cask 437, with your runner-up being the Mike Walsh 22-year-old Sherry de Laphroaig, and then honourable mention, something that you think about.
I'm gonna tip my hat to you on this one. So we don't talk about this much, but for release number 7, there's a portion of those casks that quick decision needed to be made to, just so that we can keep our bottling date. And I mentioned it earlier on in the podcast, we now, thank God, have direct relationships with some larger organizations, and so we have access to a series of distilleries we hadn't had access to before. And there was our 12-year-old Linkwood, sherried Linkwood, that was from release number 7, that you had said it's got to be in this release. It just has to. And you could have said any whiskey, and I would have been a bit hesitant, only because our approach has always been, you and I taste together. We make decisions together, and we each have vetoing rights, even though I'm the only one who's ever vetoed anything. But we don't need to bring that up again this year. Jason Neil Johnston Yellen.
There's always a fight at every family party, isn't there?
And so you said, this one has got to be bottled. And I said, okay, that's fine. I trust you. And I stand by that. I always trust you. And then I got to taste it. Just a sample. And from the sample, I'll be very honest, from the sample I had said quietly to myself, don't know that he should have selected this. I really don't. And then I
love that we're all sharing our truths today.
And then I got a bottle. And it became one of those things, like you had said before, like I had said about the Westland. What do you keep on returning to? And I couldn't stop returning to the Linkwood. And then you had said it again about this Blair Athol, that you had said the Blair Athol is being shown in a way that Blair Athol is typically not shown. And I figured out what I loved about the Linkwood in sherry was that you couldn't detect basically any of the sherry. What you were detecting was Linkwood that was being portrayed in a way that was never portrayed before, and that was spirit forward.
Yep.
And man, if that wasn't a treat. Now, I'm saying that coming from the perspective of drinking Flora and Fauna Linkwood, right? That's Diageo's Flora and Fauna releases. And then all the Gordon MacPhail releases, the 15, the 25. There was a 30-year-old from years back, I want to say. And they were drop-dead gorgeous whiskeys. But what they did was highlight the cask, and ours highlighted the spirit. And I think that was a really daring release. And I want to thank you for it. And I think it is worthy of that honorable mention, because it's doing what we as an independent bottler tried to set out to do. Show you whiskey in a way that you're not familiar in experiencing. And you nailed it.
But I also, first of all, thank you. I'm glad you came around to agreeing. But there's a certain theme surrounding our selections today, which is drinkability, where it's not just there's a shining example that you should put on your shelf and point all your guests to. It's here's an affordable offering that will really make you happy when you open it and you share it with your friends and your guests and your family and yourself, and you pour it next to a roaring fire and you just sit back and sip it. That, to me, I don't know if it's a result of the COVID years, spending so much time in my office, in my house, by myself.
Yeah.
But when I now get those rare moments to be with other people, I'm thinking, what are we popping? And how are we enjoying this?
Yeah.
And how much of this are we going to pour and imbibe and share? And I really look at what's sitting here on my desk in front of me. I'm really eyeballing drinkers. And when you mentioned that Linkwood, one of the things for me with that sample and then subsequent online tastings of it was, this is another drinker. This is another one of those pop the cork on a Friday, recycle the bottle on a Monday.
100%.
Like, you can just absolutely pound them. And I don't mean that, and you and I have talked about this before, I don't mean that as a get yourself really rip-roaring drunk. It's, if you really want to keep enjoying that flavour over and over and over again, this is a bottle that will serve you from the moment you open it to the moment you finish it. That's what I'm going for. We're in no way talking about drunkenness here.
No, and I think you should rephrase it a little bit. You said you want to enjoy that flavor, and I would suggest, do you want to enjoy those flavors?
Sure.
Right? Because while the cask was doing very little, it goes to show you how incredibly complex the spirit is. So there were hints of new make, but it was in the, it was presented as fresh fruit and boiled sweets and things like that. And again, Linkwood is one of my favorite distilleries, and I've said that for years. And this was the first time I was actually able to taste whiskey from that distillery that was spirit forward and not cask forward. And yeah, man, it was just really special. And I don't think you were saying to people, let's just get pissed drunk. I mean, that does happen, though we always suggest, hashtag please drink responsibly. But the fact of the matter is, you could hang out with friends and you could forget about the cork or misplace it, and it doesn't matter because you're all going to have a great time over this bottle. And then you're going to toss the bottle in the fire afterwards, or preferably in the recycling bin. But, here we are. It's just one of those whiskeys that you want to share with people. And in times of COVID, you're sharing comfort. That's what you're sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we transition out of this segment, I just wanted to say my wife delivered some lemon almond shortbread.
Oh, yes.
While you and I have been sitting here chitty-chatting. And it goes with the Wolf Island retail release so well. So well. And as if I needed another reason to keep popping that Vinosil, pairing it with this shortbread is amazing. So,
What if... So firstly, I'm glad we got through our favorite single cask nation bottlings of 2021.
I'm racked with guilt for all the bottlings I didn't make any mention of.
But how great is it that we have so many whiskeys to be proud of? We really do. We really do.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think that there was a straggler in the group. We never go out there saying, well, this one may please some. No, the idea is this should please all. And then sometimes we bottle ones, we say, this is going to please a lot, and the people that don't get it, we're fine with them not getting it because we love it. Anyway, I have a suggestion, Jason. Now that we're focusing on our non-single cask nation whiskeys, and maybe we should have
Or
done
bottlings.
Bottlings, yeah. Thank you. Maybe we should have done this with the single cask nation ones, but why don't we flip the script a little bit? Let's pour the runner-up first, and then the one that has won our hearts.
Oh, that's interesting.
I
I wasn't intending to do that. Let me slide over here and grab my runner-up.
Okay.
I have literally slid over here to pick up my runner-up.
Watching you slide was perfect. It was like the old dad joke
And
where
now
you
I'm
pretend
back.
you're pressing a button and you're in an elevator and you just start to sink down.
What do you mean, dad joke? That's just top quality comedy. If I saw a stand-up comedian do that, I'd be like, you are all right. You I can get behind. Okay, so what am I finishing here? I'm finishing my Stones of Stenness.
You didn't see my bottle, did you? Okay, good.
Don't take this the wrong way, but I try not to look at you when we're recording this podcast.
Okay, well, I've taken that the wrong way. I didn't even have to try. You told me to try not to. I didn't even have to try. That was the great thing about it.
Do not look at the bottom of my screen. Okay, oh gosh, we've got too many things happening now.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Okay, I like your flipping of the script. This is kind of fun. Okay, I will try to guess you,
Okay, so
which of course means I will drink my own offering here, and I will have to pour another one. Okay,
So give me some color.
Golden, a nice dark gold to that. Yeah,
Dark gold,
decent
okay.
color. Gosh, we could be anywhere in the universe here. Is it a whiskey?
it is a whiskey. I did pick something as an honorable mention that is not a whiskey, but my runner-up and my first bottlings are whiskeys. So I'll leave it there. Okay.
Okay, is this from Israel?
It is not from Israel.
Is your winner from Israel?
Let's focus on this one right here, Jason. We're talking about my runner-up.
If you haven't, let me just say this. I'll be surprised if neither of these are Israel.
So let me lay down some ground rules here. If you'll recall, part of my approach to my favorite non-SCN bottling is that I avoid anything from the Impex portfolio. Because it is
let me say this. Let me just put this out in the open then.
Yeah.
I would have bet the house that Milk and Honey M&H pomegranate cask would be somewhere in this conversation.
Okay. Yeah. No, I've always done that.
You are correct.
Right? I never want people to think that I've selected X because X is in the Impex portfolio. So.
Yep. Okay. I will put M&H pomegranate cask out of my head.
Yeah.
But you could see where I went with the color on that, right?
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. Though I'd argue the pomegranate I think is a bit darker.
Do you want to see the color on my run?
That's good. That looks like some good sherry presence. I like that.
It's also a hell of a pour. Anyway, so yours. I've even put mine back down again so that I don't mislead myself. So you're discussing whiskey. Are we in Scotland if we're not in Israel?
We are in Scotland.
Okay. Are we peated or not?
We are peated.
Okay, we have a peated Scotch. Released this year or came into your life this year?
That's a good question because regular listeners will know that I've highlighted bottlings that were outside of the year that were meant to be mentioned. But in this particular case, this came out in 2021.
I even checked dates on my winner to make sure that it was released in 2021. Okay, so your peated Scotch in 2021. Gosh, is Isla Peat or Highland Peat?
Isla Peat.
Okay. But here's the thing. I know you were hesitant to answer that question.
I was?
Unless you have said to me either, Jason, you must purchase a bottle of this, or Jason, I have purchased us each a bottle of this. I'm not up on what you've been drinking this year. We're not traveling together as much. We're not seeing each other as much. I
feel as if I either may have gotten you a bottle of this. I feel as if I would have definitely suggested it.
Okay, is it from Ardbeg?
It is. And I never, listen, you know me. I like my Ardbegs, but I'm not an Ardbeg fanatic like some people are. But this
is interesting.
This has really turned my head.
And you purchased this in the United States. You didn't have this sent to you from the UK.
That's an excellent question. Hold on. Yeah, it says 750 ml. So this is a US release, and I didn't buy it from South Africa.
A US Ardbeg that you would have as your runner-up for the year.
For the year.
Holy
That's
moly.
saying something. That really is.
That you may have told me to get a bottle of. See, the difficulty that I've got with this is when it came to Scorch Committee, you and I weren't really overly interested in grabbing a bottle of that until we spoke to Bill Lumsden on the podcast. And he said, well, you can think of this as Son of Alligator. And we were like, you've got my interest. So Scorch, I was the one who acquired our bottles of Scorch.
Okay.
So I don't think it's Scorch.
Okay.
Am I correct that it's not Scorch?
You're not correct. It is totally Scorch. So you got us the bottles. I couldn't remember how I got it. Listen, Jason, this one, I liked Ardbeg Alligator. I thought it was a good whiskey. But it didn't come through on the promises. It felt like a presidential candidate who runs on promises but then fails to deliver once elected. Alligator said, Alligator char is going to do all these great things. Watch out for the oak, blah, 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 blah. Then you get it, and it's this wonderfully soft, light, citrusy, lemony whiskey.
100%. Yep, 100%.
Very approachable, very fun, very nice. But not living up to the bill, not Bill Lumsden, but not living up to the bill that the marketing team had said, this is what you're going to get. Then, fast forward 11 years later, and they release Scorch, and now all of that oak is really coming out. Like, if Alligator 11 years ago was what Scorch is today, it would have been my number one whiskey of the year. Like, this is remarkably good whiskey, I think.
Oh, that's great to hear. Really great. I was moving us towards Ardbeg 8. The committee up for discussion bottle.
Yep.
But that was one that I brought to you and said, I actually got a couple of these bottles. What did you think? And you said, that's a softer Ardbeg. I don't think that's going to be up your alley. But you had enjoyed Ardbeg 8.
I did. Yes, I enjoyed it a lot. Yeah.
And then when I got my hands on it, I did too.
Surprised.
And I agree with you 100%. It is a much softer Ardbeg. But yeah, I think it's doing something quite pleasant. But Scorch, here's a question I was going to ask you during the week, and I never got around to it, and I'm quite happy to ask it in front of our listeners. Do you know if the Ardbeg that was the different fermentation, what was it, the 2 to 3 week fermentation, has that been released in the United States yet?
No, I don't think that it has been.
Okay, because there was talk of that being a fall bottling.
Well, yes. However, I think much like
Conditions?
ourselves and much like
Conditions?
basically, yeah, it's who can get glass right now. Right.
Hopefully Ardbeg. Gosh, how much are they making at one time?
Not as
Okay,
much
because
as you think.
I'm really desperate to get my hands on a bottle
Same.
of that
Yeah,
extended fermentation. If I miss out on that, I'm going to be really bummed. I really want to taste that. So, okay, so that's your runner-up. You want to take a little guess at my runner-up?
Well, give me the color. Show me what it looks like again. Okay, so that is
There
a
you
darker color.
It is. It is.
Okay.
You can ask me 20 questions.
Is it single malt Scotch whiskey?
Yes, sir.
It is. Is it peated?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is it sherried?
No, sir.
It's not sherried. Given that color.
That I'm holding up to light right now as I laugh. Yes, it is not sherried.
Is it Isla peat?
No, sir.
So it's Highland peat.
Yes, sir. God, I love this episode so much. This makes me so happy.
So,
love this.
Okay, so it's a Highland peat single malt Scotch whiskey, and it wasn't bottled by us. Right?
Given how you and I have played fast and loose with the rules today, wouldn't it be amazing if I put an SCN selection to the non-SCN selection round?
Well, I'm thinking about our Ardmore from a Dechar Rechar cask.
Oh, I like the way you're thinking, though. I like the way you're thinking. It's not Dechar Rechar, but...
It is Ardmore. It is Ardmore.
Oh, yeah, it's also not Ardmore, no.
Okay. So it's peated. And it's Highland. And it's not sherry, but it's dark. Is it New Charred Oak? Or is it Dechar Rechar?
It's listed as a virgin oak finish.
A virgin oak finish. Is it independently bottled?
It is.
Is it an infrequent flyers bottling?
It is.
Okay. Oh, see, this is interesting because I don't have any infrequent flyers. I'm trying to. So is it a Ben Riach?
Ask yourself, why would Jason
Oh, Ben Riach
have
Speyside. Sorry, go on.
a Highland peated single malt from Alley Walker at Infrequent Flyers? What would lead Jason to acquire something in the UK and then find a way to get it into the United States?
Well, you
Highland peat.
you look for birthdays. Does it have anything to do with the date?
Nope. You're going to kick yourself so hard. So hard.
There's a tie to the distillery. You have an affinity for the distillery.
100%.
Has Billy Walker owned the distillery?
He has not. He's been part of the organization that has owned it, but he was merely a whiskey worker in those days. You're going to kick yourself so hard.
Would you consider an island to be part of the Highlands?
100%.
Is this a Lechig?
110%.
Okay, so it's a Lechig with a virgin oak finish by Infrequent Flyers.
Yep. Distilled March of 2010 and bottled June of 2021 with this virgin oak finish, bottled at 58.5% alcohol. And you can see
Color's fantastic on it.
my
Bottle for the
UK tax stamp
Yep.
right there.
Oh, they didn't even put the sticker over it.
Well, I had it shipped to a mutual friend
So,
who resides in the United Kingdom.
So tell me why you selected this 10-year-old Lechig with a virgin cask finish.
So, as you know, I've got a small collection of independently bottled Lechigs.
I do.
The vast predominance of them are in bourbon. Some are in sherry, including one of our own on my shelves here.
13-year-old?
I have none that are virgin oak finish.
Well, that's what
And I
Infrequent
was-
Flyers does, right? With the various finishes.
Exactly. And so I was intrigued by those components of it. You mentioned it in your earlier guessing about dechar rechar, which is something that's very near and dear to our hearts. And so the virgin oak finish, I was kind of curious what that would do. And again, like we've had in our own discussions in this episode, I was curious if the Lechig would get lost. I wondered if the wood would become too much. Now, obviously, Ali clearly liked it, and Ali clearly put it into the bottle. So I didn't think things would be wildly off balance. But, you know, sometimes if you've got an interesting finish, you find a reason to put it in a bottle and you leave the consumer to make up their mind on where they stand on it. And I thought the balance in this was really nice between the Lechig Spirit and the Virgin Oak. The colour's beautiful. And then just one more thing.
Yeah.
And I alluded to this moments ago as well. I shared this with friends the other night. And one of my friends, after tasting it, said, "This is a really fun Lechig." There's a word that's going to get my attention every time. Fun.
Yeah.
Right? That's what you and I, you know, it's not what we're all about, but it's a clear part of what we're about. And so the fact that it was fun really, that word resonated as I thought about things to bring into this episode. And my hat is off to Ali. That's a cracking Lechig that he's put in bottle.
So what is virgin oak doing on Lechig that bourbon or sherry or marsala or, you know, some of these other casks don't do to Lechig?
It's obviously bringing the colour to the spirit. How many Lechigs have you and I seen that are clear as water?
Oh, yeah. And those are the ones
Right.
we're typically drawn to. So, yeah.
Right. So it brings that to it. I would say on the palate, it brings a piquancy that I'm really digging. And it's a liveliness. You and I have talked about a word that you like is effervescence.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's not quite effervescent in the way you use it, but there's a sprightliness, a springiness that comes to the palate with a nice draw of this liquid. And it really livens it, really wakes it up. The thing I was curious about was, would it become spicy? Would it become astringent? Would it become puckering?
Yep.
And it doesn't. It's none of those things. It's really juicy with this piquancy right across the palate. Right, we're back to that idea, and you know, way back in the beginning of this episode when we talked about the interview with Georgie, you go in with one set of expectations, and you get presented with something else. Yeah. And when I read this on a website, I had one set of preconceived ideas, and then once it landed and I opened it and I started drinking it, it was a whole other experience, and I love it when that happens.
Does it specify what kind of oak, or does it just say virgin oak? Yeah,
Just virgin oak.
All right. Cool. Oh man. So
yeah, and I would also emphasize it. 58.5 doesn't drink with anywhere near that much alcohol.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I need to look out for that bottling.
And I do apologize because when I purchased it, I did not rope you into it, partly because I knew you would say yes. And I didn't need to be spending more of your money. But I also bought the allowable 2 so that I could open one immediately
Yeah.
and then keep one back for replenishing the shelves. So I do apologize that I was a little bit selfish when it came to the Lechig, but it's not a thing I normally tend towards.
Yeah, normally you do think about me, but this time you decided to forget me altogether.
I did not. I know,
yeah.
and God, this episode, I feel like I'm in confession today. Like, I feel really bad that I didn't loop you into this, and then I made it a runner-up. I'm a terrible, terrible friend. I'm so sorry, Joshua. Thank you for putting up with me.
So the place for number one whiskey, I've poured my number one whiskey, by the way. I have two number ones, and I have a bottle of number one at the RØDE, and that's what I'm drinking. And the other one I've had multiple times with a bottle on the way to me. I don't think I would be doing this justice. Like there is a specific reason why there are two. And it's remarkable, absolutely remarkable.
We have both taken this episode absolutely off the rails. We're going to have to
It was funny just watching you, like, contain your laughter. You're like, what the fuckitedness as I'm talking. That was very fun.
Oh my goodness, this is hardcore, my friend. Okay, so which am I guessing? You're only going to put one in glass, but then you're going to announce your other co-winner?
I'll announce the co-winner, but
the fact your co-winner didn't become a runner-up, but you had a runner-up and co-winners. Oh.
So marvel at its color.
That is lovely, yeah. Yeah, another dark one. Yeah. It's almost like a bright amber. Again, we're basing this on the video, but bright amber, burnished copper. Doesn't look quite as dark as burnished copper.
Yep. Cask strength.
Scotch.
It is not Scotch whiskey. You would think it would be.
Is it single malt?
It is single malt.
Okay, world single malt that gives this nice bright amber color to it. Could be a host of things, couldn't it?
Could be.
Is it from India?
It is not from India.
Is it from Australia?
It is not from Australia.
Is it from America?
It is not from America.
Is it from Sweden?
It is not from Sweden.
If you've picked an Irish, this is the end of the episode.
It's fucking not Irish. Hey, I like my Irish whiskey. There's some really those in the know Redbreast
for sure.
And there's plenty of great Irish, but this is not Irish.
Oh, okay. Oh God, there's so many countries. Just tell us the country.
I can't.
Yes, you can.
I mean, I can, but if I do, then I feel as if it gives it away a little bit.
You've got so many selections to get through. Tell us the country.
I will say that it is from a country that is considered the least traditional country to produce single malt in.
Is it from Zimbabwe?
It's the second least country.
Is it from Tanzania?
It's the third least likely country. So this is what I'm going to tell you, Jason. Should I put you out of your misery?
100%, yeah, 100%.
I'm breaking rules. This
you can just call that today's episode. Year in review. There are no rules.
I was so wowed by this whiskey as a drinker, just as someone who recognizes a whiskey that reminds them why they drink whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
That it's allowing me to break my rule of not including whiskeys from the Impex portfolio into this. This is the pomegranate cask from Milk and Honey. It's remarkable. It's like remarkable with an F. Remarkable.
If this wasn't the M&H pomegranate cask, I would be so fucking annoyed with you right now. But the fact is the pomegranate cask, I forgive everything.
Right?
Because I called it.
You did call it. But listen, there's something
Look at me not guessing Israel as we went around the world because of your self-imposed rules that you gave up on.
You're welcome. Listen.
This guy.
There was something that Chris Udy says a lot. And he said, when I interviewed him and Sam on Isla from the Macquarie Hotel, and he was talking about Japanese whiskeys. And he was talking at that time specifically about Japanese koji whiskeys. And it's called koji whiskey because in the fermentation they introduce koji, which is this mold that helps the fermentation process along. Anyway, his point about Japanese koji whiskey was, isn't it great that you have these producers that are expanding the flavor pie? Mm-hmm. Like one of the most beautiful things about bourbon is that any bourbon that's worth its weight in liquid delivers very specific notes that you would expect from a bourbon. That vanilla, that caramel, sometimes the cotton candy, sometimes the nuttiness, right? And sometimes it highlights the nuttiness in a gorgeous way or the cotton candy in a gorgeous way. And you say, that's great. But you can only find X number of flavors because of that cask, that New Chardo cask. And then you say, well, let's look at Scotch whiskey. Now you're dealing with a different grain, peated, unpeated, different kinds of peat, different kinds of casks, different cask usages, first fill, second fill, third fill, and so on. And so you're expanding that flavor pie, if you will. And then M&H puts their spirit into casks that previously held pomegranate wine, a type of wine that none of us outside of Israel have heard of, and it's delivering flavors that none of us have experienced before.
But I also think, in addition to us not particularly being fond of Scotch in, say, red wine casks, it's just not a marriage that has really worked for me. But then to take Milk and Honey, to then take their single malt, to then put that with pomegranate wine casks, and it's magical. Absolutely magical.
Yeah. And is it young whiskey? Yes, it's young whiskey. It's 3 years old. Does it taste like young whiskey? I don't know. It tastes like a perfectly balanced whiskey that spent X number of years in a pomegranate cask. It's perfectly balanced. It's delivering the spirit character that clearly says M&H to you. But then it's giving you all this fruitiness and this lovely, just sort of soft drying quality on the finish from the pomegranate wine. It just, like, there's no sherry cask that's going to do this for you. There's no port cask, no Cabernet cask, no Grenache cask that's going to do this. It's specifically the it's specifically the pomegranate cask that's doing this, and it just hasn't been shown before, and I like that. I like that M&H so freshly on the scene as a world whiskey producer says, you know what? Check this out. Like, they're still cutting their teeth, but they're cutting their teeth on experimentation and, back to what you said about the infrequent flyers bottling, on fun. This is fun. They even said it. We don't really like this pomegranate wine. It's not really our bag. However, what the casks are doing to the spirit that we put in it afterwards is remarkable, and they're not wrong. I think that this is a really important release. I said this to our friend John K. the other day, John Kaz, Polish John, who went to Malt Stock with us. And I'd sent him a picture of Ardbeg roller coaster. And he said, oh man, I haven't had that before. He's since had it. I shared some with him. And I said to him, this is an important whiskey. This whiskey is back to the word masterclass. This whiskey is a masterclass in blending. I think this whiskey is also an important whiskey. It's not a masterclass in blending, but it highlights just what can be done when you want to set aside business sense and put fun first. Right?
Yeah. No, spot on. Spot on. Did you look at the bottom of my screen there?
I did, but I don't know which one it is.
Well, okay. So pause your waxing lyrical. I agree with every word you said about the M&H pomegranate cask. It's
remarkable.
It's absolutely exceptional.
It's exceptional.
Such a wonderful, wonderful product. But whereas you have a rule where you, until today, do not go near the Impex portfolio, I don't have the same rule. And as you just saw a second ago, I have my non-SCN whiskey of the year is from an Impex portfolio distillery. I don't want to give too much away. I will show you this lovely, bright,
so good,
reflective
what I would assume is a bourbon cask. So here's what I'll say to you and to the listeners. Can I mention the distillery?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I saw that it was a Kilchoman. I saw that it was a red label, so therefore that means it's a single cask.
Mm-hmm.
Was it a single cask for the U.S.?
No.
Nope. Okay.
Nope. Nope.
Interesting.
I don't want to give too much of the game away, but after embarrassing myself and falling on my own sword that I didn't share the Infrequent Flyers Lachig release with you.
As you should.
This is a Kilchoman bottling that I shared with you when I placed my order. To make sure you were included, and Elijah was included, and my Whiskey Society was included. And we have talked about it on the podcast in 2021, and our talking about it on the podcast led to it being sold out when I went to purchase a bottle 3 days later.
So this is the Kilchoman 13-year-old where notes were given by Billy Abbott, where I said this one is as fruity as, if not fruitier than, a Bowmore. Yes. That's pure fucking magic right there.
What's amazing to me is it is 13 years old. It's only 53.9% alcohol from a bourbon cask, but there were only 204 bottles of it.
What's the year though?
2007.
The distillation year.
July 2007.
So here's why. When you say only, I say that's a lot. Because in 2008, Kilchoman solidified their deal with Buffalo Trace Distillery to get exclusively bourbon barrels. Given that there's over 200 bottles for a 13-year-old at a slightly lower ABV of, what was it again, 53 or 55?
53.9.
53.9. That tells me that was likely a coopered bourbon hogshead that they had gotten. you're still over 200, which is good, but your ABV is kind of low for cask strength at 13 years. So my guess is that was a coopered bourbon hoggy rather than a barrel. Does the bottle say if it's a bourbon or
doesn't.
hoggy?
No, it doesn't. Bourbon matured, single cask, bottled exclusively for the whiskey exchange. The back is just the notes. No, there are no sizes giving, but I appreciate your coopered bourbon hoggy hypothesis.
What's the cask number on that?
197/2007.
Okay, I know I have at least one bottle. I may have two bottles. This is just me talking directly to our friend Travis Williams right now. If you don't have a bottle of this, Travis, your collection is incomplete. So find one. There we go. That is. So is that your runner-up or is that your number one?
No, this was my winner because the infrequent flyer Lechig was my runner-up.
Oh, look at
this
that.
Kilchoman.
Yes.
It's easy, right? This is the best non-SCN I've had, and just like the Wolf Island that was my SCN winner, I was drinking this yesterday while I was reading Zero. Like, this is an afternoon Kilchoman.
Yeah.
And it's an evening Kilchoman. And again, the same friends that I poured my Lechig with, I poured this Kilchoman with. Because this is such good whiskey, you want to share it with friends whenever you have that opportunity.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's a really good selection. And to be honest, I hadn't thought about it because I typically try to not think of Impact's portfolio distilleries, but this pomegranate cask. So let me tell you really quickly.
Your joint number one?
Yeah, my joint number one. Are you ready for this, Jason?
Sorry, I'm still sitting here drinking. This Kilchoman has something in it that reminds me of my cousins coming over from Dallas in the 1980s to Scotland. And it's a juiciness, a freshness that I can't quite place. But I remember being in the 80s with my cousins from Dallas, Texas in Ayrshire. Sorry, that's where I was when you said, "Are you ready?" And so,
is it a smell?
Now,
is it a flavor? Like,
no, it was on the flavor. Yeah, absolutely on the flavor. But you now have my undivided attention.
It just really quickly while you're saying that, I often think about visiting a relative who used to live in Orange County back in the 80s, and I often think of him anytime I'm drinking a whiskey that has notes of lavender in there, because all around the house were lavender trees. And whether it's on the nose or on the palate, there's something so special about whiskey in that it doesn't just deliver flavor, but it can transport you back in time. And so that's why I asked.
That's exactly it. Yep, that's exactly it.
So
I will sit with that later, and I will reinvestigate. But yes, you have my undivided attention.
This is a bold statement, Jason. And again, I am going to take my employment at Impacts out of the picture and let you know that the M&H Dead Sea Apex.
That was going to be my other prediction.
Holy crap. That whiskey is doing some of the most amazing things. And this is like you and I, Jason. You and I have privately had this conversation around terroir. And you and I think, generally agree that terroir doesn't really exist when it comes to whiskey, with the exception of maybe...
Depends how you define it, yeah.
Depending on how you define it. In the definition of Islay whiskeys, where you're burning Islay peat, that's terroir. You're actually infusing the physical terroir into the barley when you're burning the peat and drying the barley. And you can sense the difference between Islay peated barley and Highland peated barley, right? The terroir is just evident and inescapable. And M&H are highlighting terroir from a maturation standpoint, where they're saying, you know what, we'll take these casks, we'll put them in the Dead Sea for a year and a half, where the angel share is 25%.
To be clear, not in the Dead Sea.
Yeah, near the Dead Sea. And
Very near.
Right. And then we'll bring it back to Tel Aviv for another year and a half and see what it does. And what did it do to that whiskey? Is it salty? No. Like, I know a lot of people think, well, you know, it's the Dead Sea. That entire sea is salt, and the air is filled with salt, and casks breathe. Is it salty? No. But quite similar to the schmaltz beer that we did, where it was an IPA matured in a rye cask with mustard seed. The mustard seed didn't add flavor, it added texture. And that year and a half in the Dead Sea gave that whiskey a texture that is remarkable. It reminded me of our 2-year-old Catoctin Creek, where it was just like a little puppy just licking your face, just like rich and heavy and just whatever. And the flavors were just off the charts. You know, it's just a great tasting whiskey with the best texture ever. So M&H has won my heart.
One of us in this conversation still hasn't tasted the Dead Sea.
Won my heart, Jason.
Apex release.
It's won my heart, Jason.
If the other person in this conversation could take care of that, it would be much appreciated.
A brother hooks a brother up. Listen, you'll note that even I didn't have a bottle of it.
It's true. It's true.
So,
although you saw my Blair Athol.
Oh boy,
my brother didn't have a bottle of that either. So
I've seen your Athol way too many times.
You leave Blair out of this. So listen. We have to bring this to a close.
No, we don't. I still have to talk about my non-whiskey honorable mention. I told you about my non-whiskey honorable mention, and then we have something that I know you want to talk about.
That's the thing I'm trying to get us to. Listen, let's very quickly cover a non-whiskey selection, because you sent me something that I opened just the other night. It was Shabbat. I'm
going to pour the same thing, because we're of a mind, Jason.
We're of a mind. We're of... Well, okay, my open's downstairs. My closed is up here.
No. I can edit. Go get your bottle.
I had a hard stop of 5:30, but okay, hold on.
Jason, that is amateur hour. Fucking amateur hour.
Let me just put this on mute, because I'm gonna have to grovel to my wife. So you're not gonna be privy to that. So.
Yes, dear, I know I've done it wrong. I know, but I don't want Joshua to be mad at me. He's such a nice guy. I don't want him to be upset.
Oh, shit, he's back. I didn't even see that. I looked down and then I looked up.
Yeah, it was a drive-by groveling.
So
you and I agree
yeah,
on our non-whiskey selection here. I'm actually going to get a clean glass for this.
So I've washed out my glass. So I like that you and I agree on this. What's interesting about us agreeing on this honorable mention non-whiskey bottling is that I've gone through a bottle and a half of this, and you've only just bottled it, but I told you that this is like drop-dead gorgeous, remarkable stuff.
Yeah, now you've introduced this to me, there will be an open bottle of this close to me continually.
At all times. So do you wanna talk about it?
No, you go for it. Since you introduced me to it, you take this stage here.
Regular listeners will know I actually made a similar suggestion, if not last year, the year before, where I highlighted a non-whiskey honorable mention drink. And that time before, it was a sherry. And this time around, it is yet another sherry. And so this one is bottled by Equipo Navassos, and it is called La Bota de Palo Cortado and 102. And then next to the 102, or just to the right of it, it says Floor Power MMX. So I'm going to be honest with you and honest with our listeners. I don't know what any of this means. However, I do know some things, right?
Is there a chance the MMX is 2010 for the grape?
Yeah, that could very well be. I like that Greek numerology going on there. Now, but the interesting thing here is their highlight of, instead of calling it flower power, they call it floor power, FLOR. And so for those that are not very familiar with the word floor when it comes to sherry, right? Most people, when they think of sherry, they think of Harvey's Bristol Cream, right? Cream sherry, which is a mix of Oloroso.
Not regular listeners to this podcast.
Wow. Hey, you know what? I wouldn't be too put off if they did, because I actually kind of like Harvey's Bristol Cream. It's a fine little easy sipping sherry for anyone, including your grandma, but that's what makes it a problematic sherry, because even grandma would like it. But when it comes to sherry, you run the gamut from dry to sweet, from Fino to Pedro Jimenez. And in between, you have Manzanilla, you have Amontillado, you have Palo Cortado, you have Oloroso, right? You have Moscatel, you've got Pedro Jimenez, and then there's some other stuff, like Amoroso, little bits and bobs in between. But when it comes to sherry, when the word floor is talked about in regards to Fino sherry and Manzanilla, where the wine itself is being protected from both oxidation and from the wood by a layer of yeast that is sitting on top of the wine inside the cask. It's protecting the wine. And the way you turn a Fino or a Manzanilla into an Amontillado or further on is you add in some neutral spirit. You increase the ABV of the wine inside. That kills the yeast floor, and then all of a sudden oxidation kicks in, and then the oak influence kicks in. And so Palo Cortado is supposedly known as a variation of Amontillado. So a bit funkier, a bit heavier, a bit just different overall.
And I do love Amontillado as well.
I love Amontillado. But what's so interesting about this one is they're calling this Palo Cortado floor power, and it's bottled at 18% alcohol. So usually the floor is killed at 15%. So I don't know why they're calling this floor power. I don't know the reference to that. In the end, we do know that it's a Palo Cortado sherry. It's 18% alcohol. We don't know how old it is, but what we do know is when I first nosed this, I got some of those floor notes, those yeasty kind of notes coming through, which usually comes through as this kind of like floral note, like wildflowers and things like that. Beneath it are heavier scents like caramel, some fresh mustard. It's funny, we mentioned mustard before with the beer, like I would almost say mustard greens on this. It's just, hold on. There's almost like do you know that German sprouted bread, the thin brown bread? That bread slightly toasted on the nose.
Yeah, the question that I've got is, if we turn the listeners on to this Palo Cortado, will there be less for us to enjoy?
Listen, in a way, I care, It makes me a bit nervous that people are going to get into sherry because once they discover how beautiful it is, it's really hard to turn back. I don't think so. Here's one thing I'll say: I don't think wine drinkers are necessarily find an affinity for sherry wine, which is surprising, right? Because they are wine drinkers.
Yeah.
But because oak plays such an important part in a lot of sherry, I think whiskey drinkers would find more of an affinity with this. I wish wine drinkers would find more of an affinity for good sherry too. So while, yes, I would be upset that there would be less sherry for us as sherry enthusiasts, I would be happier that there are more old school classic sherry casks available to whiskey producers to mature their whiskey in.
Yeah. If only Palo Cordado did better with Scotch maturation. Remembering a very famous Brookladdy friend of ours.
Oh, can you talk about the palate here? I've described the nose a little bit. I'd love to hear your notes on the palate.
Real buttery is the first one for me.
Yep.
But not just in a texture, but also in this wonderful creaminess that also brings this sourness to it, which, a soft, pleasant, pleasing sourness.
Yeah, right. I would say it's not too far off from a nice sour beer that's giving you a sourness, but it's also delivering fruity flavors and a bit of malt potentially as well.
Yeah, the fruit comes back. The sweet fruit syrup without being overly sugared or overly sickly sweet on the palate.
Yeah, almost like a tinned fruit syrupy quality to it. Yeah, I like that.
And then so wonderfully drying around the gums and the teeth, my lips, the inside of my cheeks. And you just take another swig of it, another drink of it.
Yeah, it's really gorgeous. It's funny. So many people talk about wine and do so in a really passionate way because it moves them. I've found when it comes to white wine and when it comes to red wines, I'm typically impassionate. I'll drink it. It's good. It makes the time pass. But when it comes to sherry, there's seemingly, at least to my palate, so much more going on. It's ticking more of the boxes that any other wine would do. And some of that is obvious with the oak, but some of it is not so obvious with the yeast and with the oxidation and with that sourness that you don't normally find, but it's so pleasant in the sherry.
But I like your talk about the oxidation, right?
Yeah.
It's talking about the process and how that results in flavor and texture. I just finished mine. That is...
So I'm not finishing that. I'm going to finish that after this. But I brought a second glass because I know, Jason, you and I have a very specific whiskey that we want to toast to ourselves, to 2021, and everything that we've accomplished in 2021, and to our listeners, of course, because, we say this all the time. When it comes to Single Cask Nation, we wouldn't have a business if it weren't for the nation members and our consumers around the world. But similarly, we wouldn't have, this podcast if it weren't for our I mean, we would, but it's more fun with listeners than without listeners. And so we're raising this glass to everyone who makes our whiskey lives possible.
100%. For me, it connects back to this being a special episode in the year. This is the chance for us to reflect on what we've bottled, what we've sold out of, what we've enjoyed, what we've shared. But also to remember the listenership and to celebrate the listenership the members of the nation, those who support us in all of our endeavors. And I said this to you before we hit record this afternoon. We've been sitting, not literally, because I know that's your joke. We've been sitting, not literally, on this sample. It is only a sample. I'm not going to pretend that I have a full bottle of this. But we have been sitting on this sample since the first week of August, when we were unable to be part of a Drammer's tasting, but we had bought the kits, and it was a Glen Grant tasting, a distillery that is near and dear to our hearts.
Oh, yes.
The people associated with Glen Grant, especially Dennis Malcolm, are people that we thoroughly enjoy and celebrate in the theme of the moment. We have a very dark, sanguine copper,
can we just
ruby red sample in our glasses.
There has, you and I, even the 22-year-old Lafroig that I showed you was nowhere near the color of this whiskey.
And I'm still watching the legs on this as it comes down the glass here. Yeah. But we have in front of us a 1960 Glen Grant that was bottled by Gordon and MacPhail at 49 years of age at a mere 40% ABV. And the legs on the side of this glass do not suggest high dilution, a lot of water in here. I imagine, was 40.1, 40.2 when it made it, as a selection for bottling.
Yeah, and the other thing that I was going to say as well is, one of the telltale signs of whiskeys with caramel coloring is you could take the whiskey and bottle and you shake it, and when you look at the bubbles, if the bubbles are kind of the color of your whiskey, then there's actual caramel coloring involved here. And the caramels were white as, the bubbles were white as could be, so there's no caramel coloring going on with this one, which was nice. And so 49 years, bottled, when was it? 2009. So distilled 1960, bottled in 2009.
I'm so sorry. I know we were still nosing this, and I accidentally put some over my throat.
I saw that. Are you really sorry?
I'm not sorry. Not sorry. Not sorry. Oh. So pause for a second.
Go ahead. Yeah.
That nose has a florality to it. And I don't know if this is just coming from the Palo Cordado into this Glen Grant expression. But there's something fresh and floral and almost tree blossom in the spring happening on the nose.
Yeah, it's like fresh sassafras leaves, and it's those unusual scents that you can't really put a word onto it, but I like what you said about spring. Right? Spring has a certain smell to it. Whether it's the leaves coming out of the buds, the flowers starting to bloom, the ground starting to soften again after months of a hard freeze. Yeah.
Dare we say a certain fecundity?
Oh my gosh. What the fecundity is going on with this whiskey?
I'm lost in its fecundity.
So let me ask you this.
That's really appealing, yes.
So as you nose this, would you at 49 years, would you say that's a good Glen Grant, or would you say that's a good 49-year-old whiskey? In other words, is Glen Grant hidden?
No, I would not peg it for a 49-year-old whiskey. I think if you're getting notes of spring, you're not getting something that's showing its age. And I think about when we sampled the 1958 or the 1953 Glenfarclas that was 58. That was velvet on the nose. And this is much more spring-like. I really mean it when I talk about the blossoms there. On the palate, I think the sherry influence is heavier.
Yeah.
And that brings a certain velvet quality to it.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's overly sherried. The dark colour had us both a little worried that it might be overly sherried.
Mm-hmm.
I think the ABV is in its favour here, where it has softened into that 40%.
Yeah, I think the nose to palate transition is a really nice one. It's clear there's a connection, but there's an evolution going on. There's a freshness to the nose, albeit you could smell it's old, right? There's that there's a note that I can never put words to other than, oh, that smells old. Oh, that's had time in oak, right?
Do you know how I describe it?
Yeah.
And this isn't going to be positive, but this is how I describe it. Mildewy pillowcases.
Oh, that's not bad.
Speak to an age on the nose for me.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So here we go. Oh my gosh, this is so fucking great. So my grandparents growing up, they had I would spend weekends there, right? Because my mom, fresh off a divorce, she was dating and she had her dating life. And that's fine. I'm not complaining about my upbringing. I had a great upbringing. But what it allowed for was weekends with my grandparents. And my grandparents had this great sort of like wood panel finished basement. Mm-hmm. And there was a bed there. And beneath the bed were these wood panel like small closets beneath the bed. And inside were dusty old Afghans, like the blankets, not people. And that is what I'm getting. It gets back to that dusty fabric going on. Wow, that's good.
It's good.
Holy
listen,
cow.
I'm gonna finish this before we've officially toasted, and so join me in a raising of the glass to our listeners, our Elijah and our Jess, all those who lined up for interviews for One Nation Under Whiskey in 2021, those who sold us casks in 2021.
Yes.
The year 2021, and to you, Joshua, and to me, Jason. Cheers.
Cheers.
One elephant, two elephant, three elephant, four elephant, five elephant.
There we go.
Was that too fast? I was racing to get to the dram. So
no, what's really nice about you and me doing elephants together, and I, by the way, poured a glass of water because you shamed me from my beer.
I just haven't really been drinking beer. I have my one beer a week on pizza and movie night, and that's that.
Yeah, I have about a beer, maybe 2 a week. But I figured, you know what? Let's have fun. And then when you said you weren't interested in having fun, I decided to grab a glass of water.
Here's the honest truth. The only beer that I now keep in the house does not go with whiskey. And so I never think about pouring one with the other.
What beer? Okay, so if you have a beer that doesn't go with whiskey, it's got to be some sort of like a saison or a sour. Some farmhouse ale, right?
Yep. So it's the Dogfish Head Sea Quench, and so
that's not a bad
there's
one.
Salt, there's seaweed, there's black limes. I love it as a beer, but it does not go with whiskey.
You don't think it would go with an Ardbeg or something? I mean, all those things reek of Ardbeg to me.
It is. Once I start listing those out, they sound like they would, and they don't. I think it's just too puckering. I think it's the puckering quality rather than the actual flavors themselves. I think it's that it puckers.
We still talking about whiskey? I want to grab a welcome whiskey. Let's have a welcome whiskey.